Did you know that Emperor Nero once tried to kill his own mother by sabotaging her ship? When that failed, he had her executed. This is just one of the shocking tales we'll explore as we uncover the pressures that shaped one of history's most ruthless rulers. But let's rewind a bit. Nero's mother, Agrippina the Younger, wasn't just any Roman noblewoman. She was the mastermind behind Nero's rise to power. Nero's biological father was Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus. He belonged to an ancient and noble Roman family and was Agrippina's first husband. However, Ahenobarbus died of natural causes when Nero was still very young, and later, Agrippina married Emperor Claudius. She convinced Claudius to adopt Nero, guaranteeing his place in the succession line. Now, here's where things get suspicious. When Claudius suddenly died, many pointed fingers at Agrippina. Some ancient sources even suggest she poisoned him to make way for Nero's succession. Whether true or not, it set the stage for a reign that started with promise but quickly turned sour. At just 16, Nero became the ruler of the Roman Empire in 54 AD. At first, things looked promising. Nero was popular, enacting reforms that benefited the Roman people. He gave more power to the Senate and provided public entertainment. But power can change people, especially when manipulators surround you. And speaking of manipulators, Nero's relationship with his mother was about to turn dark. A power struggle was brewing and wouldn't end well for either of them. We'll go back to this in a moment. When Nero ascended to the throne, Seneca, the renowned Stoic philosopher, became his personal tutor and had high hopes for his young pupil. He believed he could shape Nero into the ideal wise benevolent ruler. The early years of Nero's reign showed promise. Seneca carefully crafted Nero's first speech to the Senate, which struck all the right notes. The young emperor vowed to eliminate the corruption of previous regimes and respect the Senate's authority. Nero implemented several positive reforms. He improved control over tax collectors, curbing their notorious greed. Nero even allowed slaves to file complaints about mistreatment by their masters. A revolutionary concept for the time. The Roman people were pleased. Nero had a younger brother named Britannicus. Britannicus's mother was Valeria Messalina, Emperor Claudius's third wife before marrying Agrippina. Some people in Rome saw him as Claudius's rightful heir. At some point, Agrippina started to get close to him, and Nero decided to take him down. He died just 1 year after Nero's rise to power. Nero poisoned him during a public dinner party. Nero's descent into tyranny was gradual but unmistakable. He became increasingly paranoid, seeing threats to his power everywhere. His spending on lavish entertainment and personal projects spiraled out of control, straining the empire's finances. Seneca watched with growing unease as his pupil transformed into everything he had hoped to prevent. Nero's relationship with his mother, Agrippina, was complicated from the start. She had been instrumental in his rise to power, but as Nero grew into his role as emperor, he began to chafe under her influence. Agrippina wasn't content to be a passive observer. She wanted to rule through her son, and Nero wasn't having it. As Nero sought more independence and power, the tension between mother and son reached a boiling point. Agrippina had been a significant political ally but was also a source of constant friction. She attempted to control Nero's actions, even going so far as to threaten his rule. Agrippina had already shown she wasn't afraid to eliminate rivals. She'd taken out her aunt and others close to Claudius. Now, she was trying to rule through her son, and Nero was getting fed up. This power struggle set the stage for one of the most infamous acts in Roman history. In 59 AD, Nero made a decision that would forever change the course of his reign. He decided that his mother had to go. But how do you eliminate one of the most powerful women in Rome? Nero's first attempts were through poisoning, but Agrippina dodged them all. He later arranged for Agrippina to board a ship designed to sink. The plan was for her to accidentally drown at sea, leaving Nero free from suspicion. But Agrippina was made of sterner stuff. When the ship went down, she managed to swim to shore. Realizing his mother was both alive and likely very unhappy with him, Nero knew he had to act fast. Nero sent Anicetus, his loyal henchman, and a group of men to finish the job. They found Agrippina at her villa. According to the historian Tacitus, Agrippina's final moments were as dramatic as her life had been. When faced with her executioners, she reportedly bared her stomach and told them to strike the womb that bore Nero. The assassination of Agrippina marked a significant turning point in Nero's moral decline. He had crossed a line that even the Romans, who were no strangers to political violence, found shocking. Matricide was a severe taboo, and Nero's actions sent shockwaves through Roman society. After Agrippina's death, Nero's public image took a nosedive. He had been celebrated for his early rule, but this act of violence against his mother damaged his reputation in a way that would be hard to recover from. The Roman people, who had once seen him as a promising young ruler, now began to view him with suspicion and fear. Nero, for his part, tried to justify his actions. He claimed that Agrippina had been plotting against him, that she was a threat to his rule and had to be eliminated. But these justifications rang hollow for many Romans. The emperor's relationships within the imperial court began to change. People who had once been close advisors now kept their distance, wary of Nero's growing paranoia and unpredictability. Imagine the internal conflict Seneca must have felt. On one hand, he was bound by loyalty to his emperor and student. On the other hand, he was compromising the principles he had spent his life advocating. Seneca supported Nero, even penning a letter to the Senate justifying Agrippina's death. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Enter Poppaea Sabina. She was no ordinary Roman noblewoman. She was known for her beauty, wit, and ambition. When she caught Nero's eye, she was already married to his friend Otho. But that didn't stop the emperor from pursuing her. Nero's desire for Poppaea set a chain of events in motion that would leave a trail of bodies in its wake. First on the chopping block was Claudia Octavia, Nero's first wife. Octavia was popular with the Roman people, but Nero saw her as an obstacle to his happiness with Poppaea. He accused Octavia of infertility, a serious charge for a Roman empress. This was just a pretext, of course. Nero quickly divorced Octavia and exiled her. Rome's people weren't too happy about this decision and wanted her back. So, exile wasn't enough. Nero had Octavia executed to stop Rome's people from asking for her. The Roman people were shocked, but Nero was just getting started. Nero could indulge in every whim with his rivals out of the way. And boy, did he indulge. He poured massive amounts of money into grand construction projects and lavish entertainments. But in AD 64, disaster struck. A great fire broke out in Rome, burning for 6 days and 7 nights. It destroyed 3 of Rome's 14 districts and severely damaged 7 others. Rumors began to spread that Nero himself had started the fire. Some even claimed that Nero played the lyre and sang about the destruction of Troy while Rome burned. This is likely where we get the famous saying, Nero fiddled while Rome burned, even though the fiddle wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. But here's where it gets complicated. According to the historian Tacitus, Nero was miles away in Antium when the fire started. Nero rushed back to Rome to organize relief efforts. He opened his palaces to shelter the homeless and arranged for food supplies. Not exactly the actions of a cackling villain, right? So why did Nero get such a bad rap? Well, his response to the fire took a dark turn. Facing mounting suspicion, Nero decided to play the blame game. And who better to blame than a new religious group causing a stir in Rome? He blamed the Christians, a relatively new religious group in Rome, for starting the blaze. This led to brutal persecution. Christians were arrested, tortured, and executed in horrific ways. Some were burned alive as human torches to light Nero's gardens at night. Others were thrown to wild beasts in the arena. While Rome was still reeling from the fire and the persecution of Christians, tragedy struck Nero's personal life. Poppaea, the woman he had fought so hard to be with, died under mysterious circumstances. According to the historian Suetonius, Nero kicked Poppaea to death during an argument while she was pregnant with their second child. Suetonius wrote, he killed her with a kick when she complained too vigorously because he came home late from the races. Nero was reportedly overcome with grief after Poppaea's death. He had her body embalmed rather than cremated, which was unusual for Romans at the time. He even gave her divine honors, effectively turning her into a goddess. But these actions couldn't erase the brutal reality of her death at his own hands. This was too much for Seneca. He started to condemn Nero's actions, and his own words came back to haunt him. He had once written, "Power corrupts the best characters." Now, he was witnessing this truth firsthand in his former pupil. Seneca lamented, "Nero murdered his mother and brother. Now he has nothing worse left to do than kill his foster father and mentor." Seneca was forced to commit suicide on April 12 of the year 64 AD. Nero's fear of losing power became all-consuming. He saw conspiracies everywhere and reacted with brutal efficiency. Anyone he perceived as a threat was swiftly eliminated. Senators, military leaders, and even former allies found themselves on the wrong end of Nero's paranoid wrath. The emperor's hit list grew longer by the day, and no one was safe from his suspicions. Like his massive golden house, Nero's grand construction projects pushed the empire's finances to the brink. He drained Italy's resources and exploited the provinces to fund his opulent lifestyle. The Roman elite, who prided themselves on their austerity and military prowess, were appalled by their emperor's frivolous pursuits. As discontent grew, so did the challenges to Nero's rule. In 68 AD, Gaius Julius Vindex, the governor of Gallia Lugdunensis, decided he'd had enough. Vindex rallied his troops and declared an open rebellion against Nero. This spark of defiance spread across the empire, igniting a firestorm that would consume Nero's reign. At first, Nero didn't seem overly concerned about Vindex's rebellion. He was more preoccupied with his artistic pursuits, spending time rehearsing for performances rather than addressing the growing crisis. This disconnection from reality would soon cost him dearly. As more and more provinces joined the rebellion, Nero's support in Rome crumbled. The Praetorian Guard, once fiercely loyal to the emperor, abandoned him. Sensing the shifting winds of power, the Senate declared Nero a public enemy. Faced with the collapse of his rule, Nero fled Rome, accompanied only by a few freedmen and the ever-present Sporus. Nero hid in a villa about 35 miles away from the city. On June 9, year 68 AD, word reached Nero that the Senate had condemned him to death. Faced with the prospect of a humiliating public execution, Nero chose to take his own life. In his final moments, Nero's thoughts turned not to his failures as a ruler or the people he had wronged, but to his perceived artistic talents. As he prepared to take his own life, he reportedly uttered the famous last words, "What an artist dies in me." It was a final act of self-delusion from a man who had lost touch with reality long ago. Nero's death plunged Rome into chaos. The year of the 4 emperors followed, exposing the fragility of imperial succession. Interestingly, some still mourn Nero, especially in the eastern provinces. The Nero Redivivus legend emerged, with imposters claiming to be the resurrected emperor. Nero's story reminds us how unchecked authority can lead to disaster. It's a lesson as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. When leaders are isolated from criticism and consequences, the results can be catastrophic for rulers and the ruled. Check out our video about Henry VIII, England's king, who was also corrupted by power and became a tyrant after a promising start.